Welcome along to this introductory program put out by the FPMT called Discovering Buddhism. So those of you who are new, my name is Eddie and I'm one of the tutors at Langri Tangpa Centre. And if you are new, welcome. So I guess first of all, you guys should all get comfortable in your seats. This just means making sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And then while you breathe normally and naturally, become aware of the movements that take place in your abdomen or upper chest. And while you continue to breathe normally and naturally, allow all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions to enter the space above you. And then imagine that every sentient being is sitting around you. And acknowledge that there are no great differences between us, because everyone equally wishes to avoid suffering. Everyone equally wishes to be happy. And everyone equally lacks genuine happiness. Furthermore, everyone is equal in that the causes of suffering can be eliminated and the potential for complete, genuine happiness abides within us. Now, to dispel the causes of suffering and actualize our genuine happiness, we have to first of all abandon attachment to the fantasies of just this life, and then to all the pleasures of cyclic existence, to our own singular welfare, and finally to grasping at an independent and objective reality. If we can abandon these 4 types of attachment, we can help everyone turn their mind to the truth and to practice the truth as a path, to remove confusion while on the path and to purify that confusion into pristine awareness. And since only the 3 jewels and the teacher indivisible protect that effect within us, decide to help everyone engage in a path as explained by your teacher and their lineage. And refresh your refuge from the depths of your heart by reciting the refuge prayer and the generation of bodhicitta along with me. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Now to enhance and stabilize the wish for enlightenment, we'll recite the 4 immeasurable thoughts together. So think in relationship to all the people surrounding us. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Now to abandon the different forms of attachment and to develop all the good qualities, we need to accumulate merit and purify the mind. And these abandonments and accumulations are all summed up in a prayer called the seven-limb prayer. So let's recite that together. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time and rejoice in the merit of all whole and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. So the last practice of these preliminaries is the offering of the mandala. So here we need to recollect that the essence of this is to just let go. And in particular, let go of the grasping that we have towards our own ideas as being true. So here we're to let go of grasping at the body, grasping at the mind, grasping at our sense of self, the grasping that there is an objective and independent world surrounding us, and the letting go of that and the imagination that we bring to giving everything precious to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of us is all within this prayer. So let's recite the short mandala offering. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamnaryatayami. So with the recitation of those Sanskrit words, think that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas accept your offering with delight. And in their delight, they smile at you. And think that through the force of that smile, your own mind is completely transformed to be open and spacious and accepting of what you'll hear today. And your mind now has the capacity to take what you hear, to become familiar with it, and to put it into practice. So a smile also creases your face. And the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front of you begin to dissolve into light, which is all drawn into the heart center of the central figure, Buddha Shakyamuni. An emanation leaves this heart, comes to abide above the crown of your head. And the light sort of dissolves, entering into the crown of your head, coming down to rest at your heart. The light expands, filling your chest, all of your limbs and your head, and even going beyond that. So the light goes out through the pores of your skin, filling the 10 directions of space. And wherever there is a living being abiding within that space, they are touched by that light and transformed. The transformation that takes place is one of enlightenment. So at this stage, you should feel that there is no distance between yourself and any other living being. There's no sort of sense of self and other here and there. In fact, there is just light, and you are the embodiment of that light. Now the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space. And once again, coming back into your heart, you become aware of your body that embodies that light. And you are reminded that you have the potential to become fully awakened yourself and to bring benefit to oneself and to every other living being. And so now if your eyes are closed, just allow them to gently open. If they're open, just become aware of your surroundings and be present in front of your screen, and we'll begin the class very shortly. So I'll just do the share screen thing now. So here we have the first slide. Like I said, this is class 5 in this module called Mind and Its Potential. And over the last 4 weeks, we've covered a number of different topics. We've looked at precious human rebirth, defining the mind, which we've defined as clear and knowing, different types of mental continuums, the Buddha nature, sources of suffering, and sources of happiness. And like last week, we looked at these two, the sources of suffering, the sources of happiness, and in particular, we looked at 2 forms of happiness. Temporal happiness, which is based on the senses and what we take from the world, and genuine happiness, which we can bring to the world as our original nature. To do this, though, requires from us a change in our worldview and a commitment to overcome the origins of our suffering. This commitment involved overcoming 4 major distortions in our way of thinking. So this week, we're going to have a look at a number of different topics. So they're sort of summed up in these 3 levels of suffering: attachment and its faults, and different methods to oppose attachment. Now, if it's happiness that we're seeking, we have to eliminate what prevents that, which is suffering and its causes. So the Buddha, in his first teaching, taught about suffering, or dukkha. And what he's asking us to do is to actually examine our experiences closely to understand the nature of our present existence. When we do, we see that we could term it as, it's not quite right, it's dukkha. Dukkha has a number of other different meanings and names, one of them called cyclic existence or samsara. And this cyclic existence or samsara is described in a number of different ways. One of the most common is the 3 levels of suffering. These are, of course, the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. So we'll have a little look at that, because out of that it comes this thing called attachment, and it, of course, has many different faults. It's one of the 3 major afflictive sources of our suffering, and it's also called a poison. It's rooted in ignorance and other distorted ideas, and it keeps us within the cycles of suffering. Nevertheless, it can be overcome, it can be opposed and overcome. So while attachment does obstruct both ordinary and genuine happiness, it really can't stand up to sort of powerful states of mind. So I want to talk about some of those states of mind in the class today and show how we could put them into effect. So these are a number of books I've relied upon. So I'll mention a little bit about some of them. So the first book up on the top here, this green book called Buddhist Psychology by Geshe Sering. It's a very accessible book, and it's a sort of a standalone book on the presentation of the mind. Geshe Sering presents sort of a three-zone model of the mind, which is a little bit different than some of the other presentations. But it has a very good presentation on the unwholesome mental factors of mind, which of course include attachment. Steps on the path to enlightenment. I'll just leave that one aside for the moment, but I'll just say it's a very complete and great overview of all the different types of mind and what we can do in relationship to it. I've used mainly this next book coming up, is Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness, Open Heart, Clear Mind, and a book down the bottom here called Arya Davis 400 to present the material here. These three books have terrific information on desirous attachment and different ways of thinking about attachment so that you sort of have less of it. So if we look at Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness, this is a commentary on a text by Nagarjuna called The Precious Garland. And The Precious Garland is sort of like a story of how Nagarjuna gives advice to a king of how he could live his life. And this is very suitable for us because the king lives within society. He's trying to be a good person, he's trying to rule an empire, but through the practice of Dharma. And we are trying to live our lives applying the practice of Dharma. And so just as the king comes up against different types of attachment, we will also come up against different forms of attachment. And in this particular book, Geshe Japa Tegchog gives some terrific advice and commentary on the text, stuff that we can actually use ourselves. Open Heart, Clear Mind by Venerable Thupten Chodron. That particular book and another called Buddhism for Beginners also have chapters and chapters on attachment, different types of attachment, and different remedies we can use. So it's very, very readable material. Arya Davis 400 stanzas on the middle way. It's also sort of divided into two sections, one on sort of ordinary life and one, of course, on emptiness. The stuff about ordinary life really talks about the distorted ideas we have about conventional reality and all the disturbing emotions that arise in relationship to those distortions and how you can put an end to it. So if you're really serious about trying to get rid of desirous attachment, those two books, Practical Ethics and Arya Davis 400 stanzas, they really are terrific to have it to read. You'll get a bit of a laugh out of it too, because they're pretty insightful philosophers, these two people, Nagarjuna and Arya Deva, and they point out the way we think and ways of overcoming it. And I'd suggest that anybody seriously who wishes to overcome desirous attachment, those are two terrific books to have a look at. Now, suppose we read all this material and a lot of it resonates with us, and we take teachings from learned teachers like our own Geshes and Lamas. one of the things I've noticed with myself, and it might happen to you too, is that when you hear the teachings and read them, you can come up with this idea of, oh, yes, 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 this is true. And then that's it. You sort of think that because you know it and you agree with it, that's good enough. So in case that does happen to you, this is what Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. He says, and though all this I understand, but later waste my time in foolish idleness, then when my time to die comes around, my sorrows will be black indeed. So we have the potential to overcome desirous attachment, in fact, all of the afflictions. But one of the things that really hinders us is attachment, in particular attachment to the busyness of just this life. And so we engage in that busyness, and we don't generate the realizations that the path shows us, and then we come up facing death. So here Shantideva says, if we fail to school ourselves in virtue and accomplish nothing good, and if under the influence of the 8 worldly concerns, our life is consumed in distraction, then we have deceived ourselves. And in fact, there's no greater delusion than this. He also says that by doing this, we're very stupid. And there is no greater ineptitude than the failure to distinguish between what is to be done and what is not to be done. He goes on to say we should not follow the objects of sense, since they are crafty in misleading us. And since our awareness is feeble, we should not let it be enslaved by confusion. Instead, we must cultivate carefulness and practice Dharma purely. So here, carefulness is really referring to mindfulness, meaning we have to remember what we've read and studied and actually apply our recollection. So in terms of recollecting what we are to apply, at our level, one of the things we should recognize is that we are sort of sick indeed. We are unenlightened beings, and being so, lack control over our senses and what's going on in the mind. And because of that, we will undergo suffering. And in particular, there's 3 types of suffering that we undergo as unenlightened beings who are lacking in control. So these are the 3 levels of suffering. There is the dukkha of misery. This just means that the sufferings of mental and physical pain and all that comes with that. There is the dukkha of change, which is sort of the being in the unsatisfactory situation of not being able to hold on to anything pleasant, and that the pleasant experiences that we have in life can actually turn into forms of suffering. And finally, the dukkha of conditionality, which means that the fact that we just have this human body and a human mind that's not under our control, that's a source of suffering. So in other words, just sort of like being human beings who are not enlightened, our body and mind are great conditions to support suffering. And there are different analogies to explain these 3 levels of suffering. One of the simplest and most useful, I think, is the analogy of the wound. So let's look at that.
Eddie, just before you go on with that slide of the 3 types of suffering. So the middle one of the suffering of change and enjoying cake, and then overeating cake, and then going, dang, I've done it again. That's kind of what you're referring to, isn't it? Of we forget. We forget, you know, oh yeah, the suffering of change, but when you're eating the cake, you forget about it until it comes upon you with overeating.
Yeah, or if you have different types of allergies. You know, so for a long time here, I've had, you know, allergic reactions to different things with my nose. But I remember for years, not for years, but at least for a year, for more than 6 months of that year, I would go up to the cake shop, which is just up the road from us, and buy a apple pie with cream. And the cream is no good for me. Every time I eat it, my nose starts running, you know, all sorts of things. I would go up to that shop and I'd just see the cake and go, yum. And I'd immediately feel like, you know, I have to have it. I could imagine it was really being really nice and good. And it took, you know, quite a bit of discipline on my part to actually decide, I'll just see if it really tastes as good as I think it is. And then I felt like I was actually eating cardboard and I couldn't actually taste the cream. And I thought, wow, this is so amazing that my mind has just made it all up. And you know, that just stopped me, you know, over time, pretty quick time, I stopped buying those pies. You know, for others, of course, we might love the cake, but then the cake makes us fat. And there's other instances, of course, when you eat too much of it, you get sick. So, yeah, this is referring all to the dukkha of change.
Yeah, great, thank you.
So here we have an analogy, it's called the analogy of the wound, to demonstrate these three forms of suffering. So the first, called the dukkha of misery, or the suffering of suffering, relates to the wound itself. Right? So somehow or other, perhaps we're burnt. Right? Now, as soon as we're burnt, that's painful, right? Both to the mind and the body. So this is the first level. Now, in relation to this, what's required of us, of course, is to acknowledge that we have actually been wounded, and not just to say, oh, no, it's fine, nothing's happened, it's okay. You know? So in terms of mental pain, we have to say, yes, I am distressed, or I'm experiencing trauma right now. We've got to sort of bring it to the forefront of our mind and accept that this is painful. This is not satisfying. That's the first level. And it's just called the dukkha of misery. Now, the second thing is the dukkha of change. So in this analogy here, we could put something on the wound. You know, you could put, oftentimes they say, cold water first, and you can put a cooling cream on it. And that will lessen the physical and mental suffering. Now, when it comes to the mind, there are many different types of cooling cream you can place upon the mind, many different methods of a path, many skills you can bring to cool the mind down. You know, one of the most, I don't know whether most people know this, but if one does not keep grasping at the pain, within 90 seconds, it'll sort of completely change. This is for mental pain.
So, Eddie, how would, say, the suffering of change with the pandemic fit into this?
Okay, so a very simple thing is in here, you can, like by staying home, right? So, you know, okay, the dukkha of misery would mean, okay, I get COVID. In terms of it changing, perhaps you are brought to a hospital and you are treated. So what was once terrible, as anyone who's read about this, I find it's very hard to breathe, then the breathing becomes easier. Now, but if you're like at home, for instance, you go, that'll be the suffering of misery. I've been locked in. I can't go out. I don't have COVID, but I can't go out. And in response to that, you suffer mentally and maybe even physically too. So the cooling cream here might be that you find yourself listening to some music. So you have, the focus goes off your distress of being locked down to listening to music, and you'll see immediately a change.
Yep. Okay.
You might even just go to the fridge and start eating. There's all sorts of things we do, don't we, to find ourselves to lessen the distress of the dukkha of misery. So those are very simple things where we can see we can change the situation just by doing something different. But then there's this one here called the dukkha of all pervasive compounded suffering. So in the example of the wound, it just means, no more contact to the wound, and we feel okay. We're not distressed. It's not a pleasurable sensation. It's just normal, ordinary. You mightn't even be aware that you have a wound there. However, if the hand or the burn is bumped in any way, all the pain comes back very quickly. So just by having the wounded hand here, it's a source of any type of future suffering. Even though you've put cream on and time has gone by, and right now it seems to be okay. So if we take it to the COVID-19 example, we're in lockdown, we don't like it. We've put on some music or something, or we've put our feet up, or the kids have gone out, something's happened that we've actually changed, and so, now we feel much better. It's actually like a good feeling. But within 90 seconds, that good feeling changes and it becomes like neutral. So if we don't keep playing music, or if we don't, we stop eating or something.
Or we start thinking about our financial situation.
Yeah, then, so for once, so for a little while it's okay. It's not happiness. It's not a feeling of happiness. It's sort of like neutral. But then, as you say, then if you start thinking of, Jesus, there's no money coming in, or the kids come back in, the suffering starts off again. So just the fact that you've got your ears to actually hear the kids come into the kitchen, right, and they're home, or that you have a mind that starts thinking about the money that you don't have, or the bills that haven't been paid. Now the feeling of equanimity disappears, and you're back into suffering. You have the dukkha of misery once again.
So that feeling of equanimity is actually a real trap, because we kind of think, it's fixed.
Yeah, that's right. It's okay. Everything's fine. That's right. And so that's one of the greatest conditions to bring about, what you'd say, when we stop engaging in Dharma. And we just get older, because we don't notice getting older, all these moments passing by. And then we find, just as the quote in Shanti Deva said, next thing we're on our deathbed and we haven't done very much at all. Yeah, it's that sort of feeling of equanimity, where everything's okay. Not suffering, not particularly happy at all, but we're okay. So that, that's the thing, the dukkha of all pervasive compounded suffering. You don't sort of feel that. So is anybody likes to ask any questions about this, or is it clear enough?
Yeah, so they were the kind of the questions coming from the chat.
Okay. So, so let's move on now. And have a look a bit more about desirous attachment. So now we have a quote by Togme Sangpo from his text called 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. And then he says, sensual pleasures are like salt water. The more you indulge, the more thirst increases. Abandon at once those things that breed clinging attachment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. So most of our attachment, excuse me, or our sensual pleasure and our attachment to that, arises in dependence upon the 5 objects of desire. I wonder if you can have any idea what those might be. Is anybody responding at all, Miffy? Okay, so these are the objects that we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. These are the 5 objects of desire. It's funny, so I remember there's one of the, there's a commentary about this, because when I thought about it, I went, oh my God, we see people, we smell them, we can hear them, we can taste them, and we can touch them. So no wonder we have such a huge sensual pleasure and desirous attachment towards people. And in fact, our world is part of what is called the desire realm because of the attachment that we have to the 5 objects of desire. So our desires gravitate towards beautiful appearances, pleasant sounds, fragrant smells, delicious tastes, and objects which are pleasant to touch. And being attached to them, we crave them, and then we pursue them. Now, I should point out here that the problem is not the objects per se. It's not the fact that we smell delicious, nice smells, that we touch objects that are pleasant to touch or see really lovely things, right? That's not the problem. The problem
Martin's just put in that it's the 5 sense consciousnesses.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah.
No, it's the objects of the 5 sense consciousnesses.
Okie dokie. So sorry, the objects aren't the problem.
In themselves, no. It's the attachment and the craving that our mind brings to them. And this is what desirous attachment has done. And a few slides later, we'll show you how that actually takes place. Therefore, the real thing is to abandon or relinquish attachment to those 5 sense objects. Geshe Tegchog says that if we have few desires, we will be satisfied. Whatever we have will be good enough and we can enjoy that. And this is what they call contentment. And contentment is a quality that we can cultivate. Furthermore, Geshe Tegchog says it's essential to be honest with ourselves. And that for our own happiness, we should try to abandon attachment to the objects of desire as much as possible. But this is a gradual process. And it doesn't work if you try to force yourself to do it using a critical, judgmental attitude. So to relinquish attachment, this really comes about through understanding how it actually brings misery to us, and to accept that. It's like me, like when I see those apple pies with natural cream. I mean, just saying that, I can already feel my mouth salivating. To see them in the windows, and then sometimes I've got they put that little sort of like a little red cherries or something in the cream.
We can all see the red cherry.
So I see all that, and it's like, yeah, I want that. when that happens to me, I actually have to look at it and then remind myself that actually, as soon as I start biting it, my nose is going to start to run. You know, and then I actually can't taste the cream. And the cherry looks great, and you think that when it goes into your mouth, it'll have some sort of lovely taste, but actually it doesn't have much taste either. You know, so I've got to sort of bring to mind, in other words, use mindfulness. Remember what I know about that apple pie with cream to overcome the strong emotional desire that I have to possess it. You know, and I go, oh, okay, actually, yeah, it looks nice, but it doesn't do to me what I think it will do. So, you know, the antidote here is just, oh, no, I'm fine. I'll leave that one alone. And then, of course, the other thing I had to do was to, you know, I'd be at home and I'd do the class, like, oh, now the pie, you know, I'd go up the shop and I didn't have to remind myself. I don't know. So then I stayed away from the shop. So you've got, you know, these different methods. One is to stay away from the shop with the pies, otherwise I might buy a pie. Or the other is to recollect the faults of having that pie. And in that way you can, you know, you gradually abandon attachment to the object. So if we have desirous attachment to people, in particular their bodies or even their qualities of mind, we need to challenge those ideas that we have about them, about those ideas, you know, challenge the ideas. Which leads us to the next slide, which is called cognitive confusion. Cognitive fusion. Right? So there's a fusion between the phenomena themselves and ourselves, the persons. So this works if you fuse the negative qualities with the person, then the person appears to be bad. And if you fuse the positive qualities with a person, then they'll appear to be good.
So Eddie, there's a couple of questions here. So one from Peter, he's saying it's the same with cakes having pink icing. They look beautiful, but they taste disgusting.
Yeah, yeah.
And Alison, so with the pie, should we try to find a way to also lose our attachment to the idea of the pie?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, Alison, when we use the analysis. You know, one thing is like, you know, I look at the pie, like this fusion here. The pie and what it looks like, I put them together and I go, a good pie. You know, like Peter said, oh, the pink, as soon as I see the pink, well, as soon as I see the wavy cream, oh, it's like clouds of goodness.
So then Anthony's asking, so when we're experiencing a positive thing, say, for instance, like the pie,
yeah,
and the wavy cream of goodness, it's about appreciating how precious existence is, or the pie is, and knowing it'll end. So like being present in the moment.
Yes, and you can sort of see, Anthony, how difficult that can be. You've got to sort of bring a lot of previous knowledge to this, because this idea of the next slide, this idea of fusion, is that we just see things and then we have ideas about them, and they come one after another really quickly. And
like
the
even
that we have and what we're looking at seem to be the same thing.
So if we think it's a positive thing, like even just the fact that we
think even just that's the fusion right there. Is there anything more you want to say, Miffy? I cut you off.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. It was just I think the pie has hit a nerve.
It's this idea of the idea of positivity and negativity, isn't it? Like we have emotions, different types of emotions, and we think, oh, this is a bad emotion or this is a good one. But this is not true, is it? Good and bad are highly dependent. But we don't sort of see them that way.
So Stephen's saying, so it's okay to have the pie. It's the attachment to the pie that's the problem.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
And then Martin's saying, broccoli, anyone?
Yeah, so you know, some might say no, and some might say yes. But it's here we're really dealing with the yeses, the yes part. Yeah, this huge agreement that whatever we're looking at is good in itself, has value in itself.
So that's the attachment part.
That's right. That's one of the aspects of attachment. So in relationship to this idea of fusion, right, so all of us have been conditioned to think and behave in certain ways, conditioned genetically as well as by our childhood experiences, our culture, the environment, and by karma. So when we see people behave in certain ways, we fuse the behavior with the person. When we see them behave in that way, we also have an idea about the person. And then our idea and the person become one thing. So these are just examples of this idea of fusion, cognitively fusing our ideas with the appearances. Now, that's why I said using the cake, you know, like the pie appears in front of me, there's the appearance of pie, but I cognitively think of it as, oh, lovely, wonderful, delicious. Right? So all those qualities seem to be cut. Now, once I do that, they seem to be fused and come from the side of the pie. It's not me just thinking this. It's like the object is delicious and so forth. And then I have to have it. You know, I crave it. So it's this process of fusion playing a large part in the appearance of the object suddenly having greater qualities that it actually does have, becoming much more attractive than it is in reality.
So Peter said, so people who appear perfect can actually be fairly ordinary.
Yes, that's right. And often this is the case, isn't it? You know, I mean, there's that thing, isn't it? Often, I'm going to say, well, one of the ideas is, I think oftentimes there's the idea of fusing, I'm not sure if it was tall people we have this innate sort of, we fuse with that the idea that this person is more competent. Right? So if like a short person and a tall person go and get a job, the person interviewing it, it's just this way of going, the taller person immediately seeing the taller person in the mind of the interviewer already arises perception that would be the better person.
The same thing happens with good teeth. The person with the better teeth gets the job.
Yeah, that's right. You know, and this is also the idea is that I'm often having people who look good and putting them in adverts. You know, so we see the attractive woman or man in the advert holding the goods, and we think, oh, this is good, you know. Like what's in this picture here, you know, we see that ad on television with Matthew McConaughey with the wild turkey walking along, you know. Matthew's a good actor, the great actor, holding the great drink to have a great time. So this idea of fusion, we fuse the labels or ideas, the names we have, to bodies, to minds, to ideas, to persons, words and speech, all sorts of things. And the process of attachment works with that. So that's just some sort of background. And the next few slides, I'm going to talk about, first of all, we'll say what desirous attachment actually is in the next two slides. And then, following on from that, what sort of causes it. So let's have a look next at desirous attachment and say what it is. So here is this technique that you can use. when you have any type of emotional state, ask yourself, like, what is it? How is it being defined? How am I defining it? Because, like I said, once you do that, there's a sense of fusion also that takes place. They go, oh, that's what I'm talking about. We use our language to describe a phenomena, and it can be very useful. But the label is not the thing. Nevertheless, it's helpful. Then we can say, so what are the causes for this? How has it come to be that I'm under the sway of desirous attachment? If it's a negative, if it's a type of behavior that we call negative, or it's unhelpful, unskillful, or brings about suffering, then we need to look at, well, how do I stop it? In other words, how do you eliminate its causes or change the causal pattern so that I don't experience this type of effect? And really say, like, what are the benefits? We could ask ourselves in two ways here. Now, what are the benefits of having desirous attachment? And then what are the benefits of being free from it? So I just want to ask that because I remember one day a man came into class, first time he came to class, he's never been back, but he argued that desirous attachment was really good and that he actually didn't want to be free of it. Actually, he didn't make an argument, he just sort of stated that. And my first, upon hearing that, I just said, oh, mate, you don't know what you're saying. But anyway, this is a way of different questions we can ask of ourselves. So let's answer the first question, what is desirous attachment? So it's a deluded mental factor that observes a contaminated object and then a feeling of and feels that object to be attractive. So it's a deluded mental factor that observes a contaminated object and feels that object to be attractive. So what's going on there? So remember this mental factor, right? So the mental factor has an effect on the mind itself. And the mental factor is getting the mind to focus only on the pleasant aspects of the object. Right? So whatever that object is, you're focused only on what is pleasant about it. Then it exaggerates the object's attraction. And then it develops, then from the mind itself wants to possess the object. In fact, many times the mind seems to become absorbed within the object. So the causes for doing this, of course, are just as I've said, the focusing only on the pleasant. So the mind is biased towards only the pleasant. This exaggeration is going on. And then, of course, the feeling that one must possess it. So what are the causes? Well, one of the major causes is what they call ignorance. The ignorance of the mind reifying the object so that it seems to have all these good qualities itself. It's like the mind, it seems as if the mind has been taken out of the picture and the object has the qualities itself. And this is the idea of cognitive fusion. Whatever you've imputed or whatever you thought the object is or has, it's now appearing to you from the side of the object. How to eliminate this? Well, there's a number of different things you can remember. First of all, desirous attachment comes and goes. So I'll give you an example, right? So many, many years ago, when I first went to Sydney, I walked into this house where my mates were, and there was an Australian girl there, and man, she was a glamour, right? And she's standing there in a bikini. So blonde hair, great breasts, great tan, terrific bikini, and I'm going, wow. And then she opened her mouth and started talking, and all my desire for her vanished immediately. So you can see there, it's like, this is what adventitious means. It can come and go. I've also seen this happen with myself, where you see a really attractive woman, and then my eyes go down, and then her feet were really strange. And it's like, holy heck, suddenly they're not so desirable. So this shows you a way of actually eliminating attachment. But you've got to sort of find something about the object that opposes your original desirous attachment.
So there seems to have to be a balancing act here, because you don't want to just flip over to, yuck.
Yep, that's right.
How do you like? It's
Well,
not this tightrope.
Yeah, I like to actually, in many ways, you do want to switch across to yuck. But you have to be careful here. I mean, that yuck is a main way of the Hinayana methods. Is about you get on the whole yuck thing, because you don't want to have those objects. But I remember myself when I did this. The problem with it, when you go for the yuck, is that you might stop having anything to do with women or people. And you don't realize actually it's not the object, it's your own desirous attachment. So that's the danger of that technique, Miffy.
Right, so the yuck is like inoculating yourself from attachment, but it doesn't show us how to relate to human beings, for instance.
Yeah, that's right. So that's the danger of going, to go, now that I've seen her feet or I've heard her voice, all of her is yuck, But before she opened her mouth, I saw her feet, everything about her is great. So you can see both sides, you're doing this fusion business. Right? And it's sort of to become like aware of that, what your mind is actually doing here. So you have to love the person, but look at the faults also about having attachment towards the person. Or looking at these characteristics and seeing that actually we are the ones imputing them to the person. In fact, we look at, through the study of Dharma, you get to look at people quite differently. So desirous attachment is called adventitious, meaning it comes and goes dependent upon many other different factors. Not only that, desirous attachment itself is not an intrinsic part of the mind. Of course it can't be, because it comes and goes. It never penetrates the clear and knowing nature of mind, and it can't stand up to powerful states of mind. So its causes actually can be eliminated, even hindered and thwarted. So the benefits of removing attachment from the mind or damping it in any way, preventing it in any way, first of all, your suffering diminishes. And then you can life becomes much more meaningful, because you're relating to the objects authentically, as they actually exist, not as you make them up to exist. And then, of course, your relationships become much more meaningful and useful. So there's a great, and of course, a sense of contentment. If you're not overestimating people and objects, you are relating to them much more, like I said, authentically, realistically. So here's another clip, So I thought, we've got Miffy's called Angelina attachment. So Angelina Jolie, of course, very beautiful woman, and I'm sure many, many men have great attachment to her. But this is what it does, So summing up what I said, the last one, it exaggerates her good characteristics in such a way, in fact, that negative ones don't appear to there at all. So it exaggerates the pleasant aspect of the object. It imputes or projects non-existent qualities to the object. It focuses only on, in other words, biased, the pleasant. And then, of course, the mind becomes absorbed sort of with the object.
Eddie, so Anne's just said advertising executives would not like this Dharma analysis.
Oh, that's right. They would not.
I'd also add in that I think advertising executives understand this and use it against us.
Oh, for sure they do. Yeah, this type of information came out in the early 1900s. Actually, they used this whole idea to get America into the First World War. Attachment, desirous attachment to country. And democracy, you know. And the same guy who helped America get into the First World War actually kicked off the cigarette smoking campaign. So let's see now what actually causes it. So the next, well, at least next couple of slides, really looking at the causal process. And then after that, we'll have a look at what happens once we become sort of attached. So here we have, first of all, quite a simple presentation where we have these four causes. So here we look like the root cause of desirous attachment is called self-grasping ignorance and its imprint. And this idea of ignorance and its imprint will go across the next slide. We talk about the latency in object and the seed and the mistaken dualistic appearance. So here, what this is really getting at, this root idea, is that the mind is believing that whatever is appearing to it exists in the way the mind thinks it does. So in other words, if a pleasant appearance arises and the mind goes, it is, it's good. In other words, like my apple pie with wavy cloud-like cream and the cherry on top appears, the mind just immediately goes, good.
So Eddie, Helene's just said attachment's so clever at finding new things to feed itself. So moving from, say, the apple pie and cream towards chocolate brownies. You think you've moved past one thing, but really it's just you've transferred your attachment somewhere else.
It'll transfer right across to anything that you find agreeable, that the mind finds agreeable. And in fact, it can even go from objects that first appear disagreeable, and then a little bit of time spent in front of them and your own mind making up ideas and how the object relates, you'll change your mind. So what was once disagreeable now seems to be agreeable. And all the negative things vanish and now only the positive appear. So,
And so, Eddie, you said the phrase of the root cause is the
self-grasping ignorance and its imprint.
Self-grasping ignorance and its imprint.
Its imprint, yeah. So this is really referring to, some of you might know of this process called reification, where the objects appear to exist independent of the mind. So it's like the mind has got nothing to do with what you're looking at. In this case, the objects, whatever it is, appears attractive and good from its own side. So, one time, Miffy, you talked about chrome, or, like whenever you look at chrome or the glitter that comes, the way that chrome throws off light.
Yeah, the shiny.
The shiny, right? So in all the shopping centres, you've got all this material that throws off the shiny. And that has to do with our natural desire for water and how the reflective capacity of water.
Yes, it's our attraction to clean water.
Yeah.
That's hardwired for us, that then anything that's sparkly and glittery we instinctually think is good because of our instinctual need for clean water, not rank water.
So you see that there are lots and lots of objects that advertisers and manufacturers will use to make them shine. Right? Like they'll actually shine up apples. They'll put wax on an apple skin so it'll appear more attractive to you. They put chrome on cars. They have those wheels that magna wheels. There's lots and lots of material that will glitter, and then it will have the appearance like from its own side. It appears great. It's really related to these objects. The objects meaning the contaminated objects. So the objects here could refer to the object that actually appears to mind. So here it's not so much the car itself, or the cake itself, but it's the cake or car that your mind is apprehending. It's a mental object here. So the seed is referring to the potential for the mind to do this, just like Helena pointed out. You go from object to object to object. And it's just because we have got this habit of desirous attachment. So you can put it onto any type of object and feel desire for it and want to possess it. So these are sort of the seed now is acting as a substantial cause for the desirous attachment. The last one, inappropriate attention. So this is one, and it's focusing on the object in a mistaken way. Meaning the mistake here is it only sees what's good. It's biased. That's one thing. The other thing is it's inappropriate is that the pleasant aspect of the object appears to be coming from the object itself and not from our mind. So we've got sort of a gross aspect and a subtle aspect in relationship to inappropriate attention. So like I say, in its gross form, it dwells on and exaggerates the attractive features of the object, but in its subtle form, it's the self-grasping which apprehends the object to inherently exist, which has a strong relationship to the seed and the root. So these are all causes. They're just sort of more, they're not all the same thing. They're just sort of coming at it from different aspects or more subtly explained. And all of this you'll see. So it's a good thing you guys who have these, the handout, because you'll see here root, object, seed, and inappropriate attention are all contained in here. A little bit different, of course, there's more here because we've got suffering, we've got the action, but all the rest, the first four things here can all be contained in root, object, seed, and inappropriate attention. And this was also the one we used last week, and it will come up again. It's just another, it's a bit more comprehensive in explaining desirous attachment and how it comes to be, and the different things we can do in relationship to it. So there is a lot we can do to oppose it, and of course I've got all this information in here in front of me, but I'll put that aside and leave that till that slide comes up. Now this desirous attachment has us act. Right? So sometimes we engage in different forms of meditation, and we just watch the mind. We just watch it sort of the activities of mind, but then we don't respond to the activity. We let it sort of play out. And this is why what they sometimes call it purifying the mind of the activities of mind, the karma it creates, by not responding. So notice, sometimes when we think about karma, there's a predisposition to think of karma in the past, where really what we should be thinking about is karma that we create in the present. Right? It's the response that we make to past activities that we want to be really careful about. That's the karma we want to be focused on. Because the karma that was created in the past is, it's going to play itself out in different ways. But the thing is not to create new karma. So in this presentation here, we've got the reifying view. Right? So that is this root of self-grasping ignorance. It also has to do with the seed, the latency, the stain, the ignorance, all those sort of things. The mind is seeing the objects to appear independent of the mind. And what happens is that the good qualities seem to be coming from the object. And unbeknownst to us, we're exaggerating that. It's our mind doing it, but we don't know that. It doesn't seem to be that. So here we've got 80% is all coming from the mind and about 20% from the object. But it might be even more from the mind, because when neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists are asked in relationship to anger, how much of the negative stuff is coming from the side of the object, and they'd say maybe 10%. 90% is from the person viewing it. In other words, 90% coming from the mind of the person who's angry. So it could even be here more in this one. Then, of course, there aren't any faults seen or acknowledged by the reifying view and this desirous attachment. Then we have to, here's my cake, it's a little bit bigger, but I must have it. Now, I'm saying, yes to this object, and I want to eat it. I want to I am dwelling on the benefits of eating it, and I want to have it. Now, whoopsie, sorry. If Miffy were there and says no, or somebody goes no, I could turn around and speak harshly to her. Right? Once you're in the grips of desirous attachment and you're prevented from getting your object, you don't like it. And whoever and whatever is hindering your possession of it will be blamed by you. So, we might retaliate by yelling at them, pushing them, doing whatever it can, punish them later on for not allowing us to have what we want, becoming vengeful towards them, harming them, all sorts of things. Right? Want them to suffer. Because we think you should suffer, because you are making me suffer by stopping me have what I want. Leading to this type of thing.
So Eddie, say in relation to if you're really missing going to work, you've got a lot of satisfaction from going to work, and now you can no longer go to work. Mm-hmm. And so, your ability to be able to contribute to the world is lessened because you can't go and do the job where you can help others. So how would attachment play into this cycle then?
Well, there's two things there that my mind focused on when you said that. One was like going to work, and then you said like doing the work. Right. So one of the things, if you think it's so great to go to work, you might start one way to go work against that. You have to think of all the things that make it difficult, like going to work. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is like, it actually doesn't stop you doing the good work you can, because you can do it from home. And the other thing to think of about good work is, what makes work good? Now the primary, if you ask that question, it's really the motivation. It's not the work itself. It's what you bring to it, which is your motivation for the work. So you bring a good motivation to the work, and then I'll ask you to say, okay, so this is what I want to do. This is what I'm trying to do. Right? So now how can I do it where I am? And see, this is the problem with, this is attachment to work, right? So it's going, the idea is to go, if we're Dharma people, you go, work's not the main thing. Being enlightened is the main thing. Work is just a means to help me become enlightened, to benefit others. Enlightenment is the main thing, not work. Right, so when you come, if we're Dharma people, this is what we're looking at. If you're not a Dharma person, of course, then you really think, it's like, well, you've got attachment to work, you've got a problem. And then I'd say, why not be content where you are? What sort of work can you do where you are? And to overcome the attachment to work, you might think, well, how about when the boss has a bad day off? Or how about you go to work and people have COVID-19 and you get the COVID-19 at work? So you sort of oppose the idea that work is all good. The workplace is fantastic. I can't work unless I'm there. So you find all the faults that might arise from that and challenge that idea. Then the other idea you have to challenge is that I can only do good work when I'm at my workplace.
Yeah, that seems to be the main one, because especially if your work involves, say, interacting with others and you can no longer do that, then because we've reified that and think it's the thing out there, then if we can't interact with others and do our work, then we think we're useless.
Yeah, so another one here, before you say, so this is what I mean by cognitive fusion. And in this time we go, okay, so here I'm saying here, interact with others. We fuse with that. Well, I'm not doing that, and so I can't relate to others, and therefore I can't work. None of that's true. So you have to sort of challenge your idea of, what do you mean by interact with others? Specifically mean?
Well, say talk to them.
Yeah, well, so so you can't talk to them like being standing really close to one another and talking to them. You go, that's true. And what's the purpose of doing that?
Being connected.
And connected to do what?
To help them and share.
To do what?
Well, whatever the task is.
Yeah, that's right. So there's, you've got to keep going for the big thing. Like for us, it's enlightenment. This is just the means to bring it about. But it's not where we put, 100% focus on, otherwise we're going to get in trouble. And it's the same sort of thing, like, we need to challenge ourselves and work out, what is it that I'm actually trying to do at work? Because that's the actual thing you've got to do. The rest is the means to do it. But if you become really focused on the means and have attachment towards that, of course, then the task can't be carried out. So It's just like Helena said, right? You can become attached to any of these steps. And you look at work, you go, okay, so you can be attached to the work itself, the outcomes, but also the process.
So Martin said, so work should be love made visible or apparent, like manifested love.
Well, if you can, great. Yep. I'm not quite sure what Martin means by that.
Well,
I mean, if you're working at work with a great smile on your face with enthusiasm, yeah, that's one good thing, I suppose. But the major thing, I guess, is the love, that you are working with love yourself. What does Martin actually mean by that?
yeah, well, I think it's like we think we do that reifying of thinking it is the work that is the thing, whereas actually it's our wanting to manifest love or help towards others that's the main thing, in just whatever way you can.
Yeah, and the work is a means to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it our kind of habit of reification that means we continuously forget that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and we see that in ordinary life and also in the spiritual life. So that's why it's always important to begin your day with your motivation. You like get the big picture in there quickly, because as you go through your life, you'll forget. You get tied up in moments. You become attached to moments, and the big picture is lost. So these lead us to this. And then we go around again, of course, and do it again. So this really, the result of this whole process is to come to the idea, look, being attached, holding on to attachment really doesn't have any benefit, doesn't produce benefit. There are many, you can do all the work you want to without having attachment to it. So there are many, many faults. These are some of them. You lose your ability to reason. You will destroy your relationships. Like, what's that show we watched with me the other night? Doctor something?
Dr. Foster.
Dr. Foster. God.
Don't watch it. It's too unbearable.
It's unbearable. You'll harm yourself and others. All sorts of people will distrust you. You will destroy compassion. Brings about bad states of rebirth. So I just want to say a little bit about destroying compassion here. So both love and attachment find the object appealing. Right? Now, while both love and attachment do find their objects appealing, the reasons for the appeal differ. Right? So love finds another person appealing because love wants the other person to be happy. The person who loves another wants the other person to be happy. And that is a correct reason to love somebody. It's a valid reason. Love which thinks, or the person who is in love with another and thinks, that person wants to be happy. So it would be good if that person were happy. So you've got congruence there, A person wants to be happy, and you want the person to be happy. You've got two things going on there. The person who wants to be happy, another who wants the person to be happy. That's love. Now, attachment or desirous attachment, that's not like that. They know the other person wants to be happy, but what they're looking at, they want that person to make them happy. So desirous attachment finds another person appealing because they think, oh, this other person will make me happy. The other person can help me. Then I feel good. It's about, me, I. So attachment is not a reliable means to be happy, because it's based on an idea that the person is good because they can make me happy. But if the other person is suffering, out of in their response to suffering, they might feel anger towards you. So attachment brings anger too. Attachment prevents you from seeing the person's helplessness. So one of the, when we look at the stuff I put up about suffering, right? So the thing to walk away after you've studied the first noble truth, the thing that you should walk away from that study is this idea: unenlightened people are helpless. That's what you've got to walk away with. That's what you've got to remind yourself with over and over and over again until you start looking at people as being helpless, under the control of karma and delusion. Yeah? Now, if you see them with desirous attachment, the idea of being helpless will vanish. So that's how desirous attachment can destroy compassion.
So Eddie, this picture's quite confronting because it makes me think, and it's also related to that previous slide of if you can't get the object of your attachment, or if it appears to change to you, and then you end up blaming it and wanting to destroy it. And like that guy just down the road from us here who burnt up his wife and kids.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And he must have cared for them at some stage to actually get married and have kids, or at least thought he loved them.
Like I said, the thing with his love would have been, you're going to make me happy. And when he thought that she wasn't, then he destroyed them. And not only do you think they weren't making him happy, they're actually making him suffer. That's the attitude, right? Before I thought you'd make me happy, but now you make me suffer. That's how desirous attachment works. And so he never engaged with his wife authentically. Well, he might have at some stage, but that was lost. So, this is this terrible fault. So I'll say a couple of other things too. Like, it's with desirous attachment, you think that your desires will be fulfilled, but that's never certain. The object is always illusory in the sense that you think it is, really lovely and great and fantastic. It will make you happy. That's an illusion of yours. Not only that, but sometimes we engage with the objects, we're satisfied for a while, but the satisfaction doesn't last. Like with me and my pies, you eat two, it's really sickly. But even when I'm eating one, it's the deliciousness that I thought it would have, it's not there. So then other type of negative minds arise. So desirous attachment always cheats you of what you think you're going to get. It cheats you in terms of your temporary happiness because it was always exaggerating it, and it cheats you in having authentic happiness because this type of mind can never ever provide authentic happiness. In fact, it always leads to more dissatisfaction and more craving. And the other terrible thing, what desirous attachment does, it distracts you from living a meaningful life. Because you're always overestimating objects and engaging with them to get what you think they can provide you with. So we have to oppose it. And one really simple way of doing it is to develop a view of genuine happiness is by recollecting objects that are dependent upon the senses that are out there can never ever provide you with genuine happiness. That's what you have to remember. Become mindful of that. Which is the second point. Apply what you remember. Genuine happiness comes from within, never from external objects of the senses. Then clearly understand the faults of having desirous attachment and engaging with it. Like here, we can look using it the example of that man who burnt his family to death. That was one of the faults of desirous attachment. And that's what can happen to us. You know, apply the antidotes. You know, in this case, using that example, you go, well, actually, my wife is helpless and actually needs me to help her to be happy, because that's what she actually wants. She wants to be happy. How can I help her to be happy? I want her to be happy. Then you've got love, you know, so the love whips out the attachment. So here against many opponents. So impermanence. Remember that anything produced by something else will change. So that's nearly everything that our senses perceive basically is impermanent. It will change. So don't overestimate them. Attachment always focuses on the pleasant, the great aspects. Find something unpleasant. You know, the cream making me sick, the fact that I can't taste the pastry, it just looks great. Oh, that woman's voice, oh, yuck, her feet are all crooked. You know, faults of attachment, that actually all the good qualities aren't actually in the object that I'm looking at. They're not there. I've overestimated it. There's bias involved. You know, perhaps a couple of pairs of shoes I need, not 30. Cyclic existence. With desirous attachment, you go round and round and round from object to object to object. Keeps you stuck. Compassion works against desirous attachment. You know, when you see the helplessness of somebody and wish to help them, that opposes this idea of them helping you, them being a source for your happiness. Right? Their primary goal is to supply you with the means to be happy. Love and kindness is also related with compassion. And then, of course, like emptiness, searching within the objects for the aspects that you think are desirable.
So searching and not finding.
That's right. Yeah, searching and not finding, but start by searching. Now, the benefits in overthrowing desire are here. Your life will be in accord with reality, the way things actually exist. Then you have emotional freedom. So most of us, I'm sure, have had bad experiences in our younger years because of our desirous attachment. The other terrible thing with desirous attachment, you know, you're putting all the good qualities out there, and then suddenly there's, you know, you always need them. There's always a sense of neediness. You yourself are not enough to be happy. Then there's this rich friendships you can develop, in relating to people with loving kindness, affectionate love, and of course good health. So, you know, the opposite of desirous attachment is you know, you become an actual authentic Dharma person. You can really strive for the freedom that you know you're capable of achieving. With desirous attachment, there's no way to have a bodhicitta. And of course, there's no way to overcome this grasping at the things to truly exist. Because we're actually assenting to it, you know. So desirous attachment really works against wisdom, realizing how things actually exist. Now, to actually overthrow this desirous attachment, we need to, over time, develop a sense of ethics. So here, the ethics that I'm getting at here is become self-reliant. Right? Control your mind using mindfulness and introspection. Keep checking. Balance the mind. Now focus on those things that you know actually provide happiness, which are loving kindness, for instance. And finally, try to see things as they really are, free of the reification that the senses naturally give them. And this is what Shantideva reminds us. All of you who would protect your minds, maintain awareness and your mental vigilance. Guard them both at cost of life and limb. Thus I join my hands beseeching you. So to protect ourselves from desirous attachment, we have to remember what we've read and what we've heard and then apply it. Otherwise, we will always be swept away. And we'll live lives of regret, wasted life, And if we can use mindfulness and introspection, and remember to do so, then we can actually use it to discover genuine happiness. So desirous attachment will bring about, well, it actually doesn't, but we have this thing called temporal happiness, which is stimulus-driven, hedonic happiness, which desirous attachment takes and goes, oh, yeah, I can be happy. I will be happy, engaging and trying to hold on to my experiences. Well, that doesn't work. So we need to sort of focus more on this aspect of life. Try to return to our original nature that up to now we've failed to recognize. And we can do that by sort of engaging in different meditation sessions and just trying to find out who we actually are. Trying to work out how the mind exists. And we actually don't need desirous attachment to be happy in life. It's a deluded mind. It's a mind that's falsely engaging with its objects. And if we follow it, we will suffer for sure. So over time, we've got to sort of turn away from these obsessive concerns that we have about just this life. And you can see that happening now with people who really want to go back to work. There's this whole sort of thing of not trying to be content where they are and use the time to discover better qualities of mind. We've got to sort of think about the future and what sort of person we want to be in that future, and generate a genuine yearning to be free from desirous attachment and hatred and these mental states that bring about confusion and unhappiness for ourselves. And like I said, we can do that by returning to our original nature, the open knowing that we possess. So we've come to the end of our class. I've gone over a few minutes. I'm sorry about that, everyone. But this is what we've looked at today, these 3 levels of suffering. The attachment is false, a number of steps, 4 steps basically, but antidotes and causes for genuine happiness. And in relationship to this, to class tonight, have a look at page 38 and 40 in the readings. There's not a great deal in the stuff what has been provided to us to actually overcome desirous attachment, but there is something here on those pages. Other than that, I suggest you use the books by Thupten Chodron, Open Heart, Clear Mind, Beginner's Guide to Buddhism, and the other books on Arya Deva and the 2 books by Nagarjuna. So there is a lot we can do to oppose desirous attachment, but it's up to each one of us. We have to. No one can make us do this.
Lady, just stop the screen share while you do the sum up.
Thank you. Yes, I'm saying there's no one that can make you give up desirous attachment. We have to find its faults, find out what it's not doing for us, and acknowledge that, and going, it's just not working. And I'm sure if you look back over your life and see how you've overestimated people and ideas that we have about things, and acknowledge how much suffering that's brought for us, and say, well, that's desirous attachment. That's that mind that I heard Eddie talk about. I've heard the Dalai Lama, or I've read about. That's what it's doing. It doesn't mean to say I've got to give up people or work or my car or having money or a nice house to live in. It doesn't mean that. It means I've got to sort of try to abandon or let go of this mind that's apprehending those objects falsely and having them appear to me as if I'm going to be even better, happier in some way. So let's dedicate now the knowledge that we've gained by listening to the teaching today, the ability that we've had to reflect upon some of it, and even our intentions to become more familiar with it and apply it in our lives so that we have less desirous attachment and more kindness and compassion towards others. So due to the past, present, and future merit, which are like a dream and exist in mere name, which have been created by ourselves, the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and all sentient beings, which also exist like dreams and in mere name. May we attain enlightenment, which exists in mere name, and lead all the dreamlike sentient beings who exist in mere name to that enlightenment, which is like a dream, existing in mere name, and by ourselves alone. Let's try and do this by ourselves alone. And this self does not exist from its own side, but it does exist in name only. So once again, thank everybody for coming along and spending time with me and doing this work. And hope to see you when I go along and have a look at your pictures, and maybe see you again next week.